to understand what that means until we see the actual code. So let's take a look at what the module may look like. Here an example, I have a module called module.js. Inside this file, I have this module code, things like the names, scores, two variables contain some data, and to export these two variables, I would attach them to either the exports object or the module.exports object like you see here. Alternatively, you can use the object notation and attach them to the module.exports, as you can see in the bottom here as well. So you may wonder, where does these exports and this module objects come from? And in the module in the node environment, it's all wrapped by this special function called the module wrapper. So this wrapper function wraps all the data you see inside each file. And so that means because it's wrapped inside this function, all the data are actually local to that module only. Any data that will not be visible to other modules until you export them out. Okay, so that is where that's why the exports and the module exports come from that object up there. You have a few other parameters too, like the require. We see that you use that to import modules, and the underscore file name, underscore dir name are just two objects that gives you the information about the current module. Let's just say you have another module over here called app, and because in itself it's just its own module, you can also export that too, right? Same rule applies. And now if I want to import the model.js to this app.js file, and I will assign that to a variable called info. So what we see over here on the app.js file is these data that are now attached to the info object. In this case, it's an object of two properties, names and scores. And you can print them out by going to the info object.names and then the index for those data, because it's an array. So that's how how you can import, export data in the node modules. So let's go and see how this actually works in the code. Okay, so back in the Visual Studio Code, I'm going to go into the demo folder and let's create a new folder here. I'll just call this, maybe just call modules. I'm going to call it plural. I'm going to rename it to modules. And then inside module, I'm going to create another a file called just model, like our slide. So this is a module. Again, the function we don't see has these parameters. The require exports module and dir name underscore file name. These are the 5 properties that are available in each module. So the last two are pretty straightforward. If you want to see what that means, you just do a console log. I can spell. If I log in the dir name, I'm just going to basically get the name of this directory. Okay, I put dir name here, console log, the underscore file name. Okay, if you save that and then go to the terminal and navigate to the modules folder inside the demo. So there it is, the model. So again, to run this file in the node environment, just type in node space and the name of the model or the module. In this case, it's model.js. Again, the .js is optional. So you see that it returns the modules directory. It's an absolute directory from your C drive. And then the file name gives you the actual file name along with the entire absolute directory to that location. So it's really useful in some situations. We're more interested in the exports and the module object here. Okay, so those two are pretty just straightforward. I'm going to delete those here. Now, if you want to know what's inside the export, so export again is just a reference to the module.export. So I'm going to do a console log here again. I want to see what's inside the module. If you just type that and save it and run the command again, okay, so you see that down here, it gives me some information about this module object. It's a collection of some very important properties. And the one that we want to see is the exports property here. As you can see, is an object. It's an empty object. So that means we're not exporting anything out in this module. if you import this module in another file, you're not going to get anything at all. Okay, so and if you, however, just do the exports like this, you save that, clear my console, run it again, you see that it's just an object, right? There's no data attached to it. So in a sense, it's the reference of the module.exports. Now, when we do something in here, so for example, if I go and type in some data, we just do some really simple data here, and we'll attach it to the exports. So I'll put here let names equal to, again, I use the same one I used in the slide. I think it was Lynn, and then we have one more for, say, Mike. Okay, and then we have the scores equals to some scores. And it could be anything, 100, 90, 80, doesn't matter, 89. Okay, so now I want to export them to other modules. So you can attach them by going to the following. Use exports. If you just do exports equal to like names like that, it's not going to work. Okay, this one here, if you do it this way, you're not exporting to other module. This is just local to this module called module.js. So if I run it now, you see that in the command prompt, it just print that information. So the same rules, just that it's a variable, assign some local data to itself. That's it. Now if I type in here, if I want to go and show the module, it's the more important one. This module here contains that information. So if I go and save that, go to my terminal, run it again, and now you see that if I scroll up, in the exports property, there's none. So as you can see, it's not attaching to the module at all. To make this work though, you would have to use like the module.exports equals the name, and then now whatever you attach to, assigned to this exports, will be exported. So go back down here again, clear my console, up arrow key and run that command again. If I scroll up again, you see that now in the exports property, I see the data being attached to it as you see up here, exactly the same name. Okay, so I'm exporting everything here, whatever it is, not everything I should say, whatever you attach to this exports object, in this case, is name. So that means if I want to export scores also, I cannot do this. If I do exports again, equal to scores, if I do that, then you only see the scores. So if I run the command prompt, you see that now the scores are passed to or exported, but not the names anymore. And the reason is because if you do the exports, this is actually overwriting what was there before, right? So just makes a lot of sense. If you want to export both of them, you have to do the following. You can do a .name as a property assigned to the names, and then the .scores assigned to .scores. If I save that now, so now I'm exporting two objects that are not attached to the exports object itself. So if I go to my terminal, run the command again, and if I scroll up, you see that now the exports has two objects. One is referenced by the key of names, that is the name, and then the second is the scores that has the scores. So that's how you export multiple data to other modules. Now this is similar to using like just the exports. If I, for example, if I go to the first one here, remove the module and just use exports.names equal to names, and if I save that, it should still work just the same. So if I go back to the terminal, clear my console, run the command again, and if I scroll up, you see that here it is. It's exactly the same as before, right? So the names and score. So it doesn't work when, again, if you don't attach that name to it. If I just do that, then it's not going to be exported. Only you see is just the score. Okay, so clear my console, run it again, and scroll up. You see that only scores is being exported. Okay, so the .name is important here. Okay, if I add another one like down here, for example, say exports dot, I don't know, just like some data equals some information 1, 2, and 3, for example. So I'm using the reference export, the shortcut that also referenced the exports here. I'm attaching another property to that So when I run in the command prompt down here, and I scroll up, you see that now I have 3 properties. Oops, let me scroll down a little bit here. So I have the names, the scores, and the data, right? So they attach both to this property. So now what happens when I go to, let's just say down here, and if I do another module.exports.data equals, I put the word apple, right? Save that and clear my terminal and run it again. If I scroll up, right, you see that now data is replaced with just apple, because again, it's a reference type. So whether I use the exports.data or module.exports.data, whichever occurs first will be overwritten by the latest one down here in that order. So that's why this was, but then I overwrote that in down here. Okay, so this should show that it actually is a reference to the exports. So either one should still be fine. The only difference is if you happen to not attach the dot property to the exports like this. If you do that, then all of these are lost. Okay, because this one here will overwrite everything and then replace with just the word apple. So if you save it now and clear my console and run it again, if I scroll up, you see that everything is now gone. All you get is just the word apple attached to the exports, and that we export out as just a simple data called apple. Okay, so that's really important to understand between the two example here. So I'm gonna just remove these here. I'll leave the rest as is. So I have the names, scores, and some data. Okay, and let's also turn this off. All right, so now let's just say we want to export this to the other module. And so I'm going to create another file here. Make sure I'm in the same directory, and I'm going to call it main.js. So this is my main application, and I'll import that inside this file. So I'm going to do I'll say let data, I'll just call it info, equals, and this is how you import information from other modules using the require function or command here. Inside here is the directory to that module. So make sure you use the // to get the relative path to your file. If you don't include the dot, if you just put, like, for example, model like this, or just the word model here, you don't have to put the .js. What it will do is it's not going to get what you expected. Okay, so if I go in here and print the console to the console info, okay, if I go to the command prompt here, clear my console, and now I'm going to run the main instead of the model. So node main. So you see it has some error. It says the module not found. If I scroll up, okay, it says cannot find module model. But why is it? But it's right here. Okay, so the reason why you need to put the // in front is to get the current directory. If you don't do that, if you just do that one, what this will tell Node is that it's going to look inside the Node module folder. So in here, it's going to go in here and try to look for that model inside there. If it's not found, then that's where you get the error, right? So what does it mean? Well, for example, if I move this model and put it inside the Node module, let's move that here, okay? It's now inside the Node module. And then now if I run it again, let me close this for now. And then if I run it again, clear my command prompt, you see that now I am able to get the information because now it's going to look inside the root directory of the Node modules and find the model file there and then run it. Okay, so it's really important to make sure you put the dot in front. If you don't put it, it's going to go into the Node modules folder, which is the core folder. So I'm going to put this back to where it was before, the model here, back to the modules folder. Okay, so now back to the main, and I fixed that already, so that'll work. As you can see, just test that again. So I got my data, those 3 data patched through to the info object, right? And so be really careful here. It's a little bit kind of tricky when you do the importing here. If you have, this is in the current directory. There's sometimes that you want to put into a different directory. So let's just say that in the model folder, I'm going to create another directory over here, and I'll call it model also. The same name as the module.js. I'm going to put that inside it. So I'm going to grab it, just click on it and drag it inside the model folder. Just confirm to move. I don't need to do this, just say no here for now. Okay, so I have the model inside the model folder. In my main, as you can see, if I run it now, just the way as is, I did not change anything in the code here at all. If I go to the command terminal and run, you see that now I have a problem. It says cannot find a module again. If I scroll up, it says cannot find module called model. Okay, well, this tells you that I'm going into a directory called model. Inside the model, I have the module.js. So I have to do something like this, right? Model and then model. If I do that, then yeah, I should solve the problem. If I run again, you see that everything comes back as before. Okay, so two things to think about here. One is if you have a model inside another model directory, if the name inside that name is in there, right? You have to go to the directory and then name that a module. If you don't name it just like that, right, we had earlier, that means I'm going to call inside the module or the folder called model, and what it would do is it's going to look for a file called index.js. That's the default. That's why we didn't find it earlier. So if I go in here to the model folder and say I create another file, I call it index.js, and I just put some, there's no data there. I'm not exporting anything there. So now if I go to my main one, notice I just put /model. We're running now in my terminal. You see it returns an empty object, okay, because it's calling the index here. Just to make sure that works, I can do an exports, module.exports, and a very simple one, hi. Okay, save that, go back to my main, nothing changes here, run my command again, you see that I get the message hi, it's returned. So when you don't include the actual module name, and if this is a directory, then it's going to look by default for the index.js file. If it cannot find one, you can have an error. So if you want to load the specific module, then you want to specify that here. Okay, and now I should get the original data back from the model. So here we are again. So that's how modules work, how you export and import into other modules. Just be careful when you name your module, where you place them, and how you import them into other modules using the / notation to make sure you're loading your local models and modules and not the one that's coming from the global or from the node modules folder. So now that we know how modules work, in the next video, we'll take a look at the HTTP module and see some of the important functions in there before we start creating our own applications.